Hello and welcome, everyone. We are so thrilled to have all of you with us as we debate a hot topic that is getting a lot of traction in the industry these days. And it's all about the partnership between customer success and sales and how you can work together to drive results and growth. So very excited to dive into today's topic. But first, let's talk about why this is such an important topic for us today. We've been doing some research within our customer advisory board, and we also have been fielding a survey. And I want to kick off by sharing some of those results with you today. This is a really interesting focus area for many in 2024. So we have a customer advisory board, and we polled them at the end of last year. And interestingly, a majority of them said that their top 2024 prediction was that there will be a greater emphasis on expansion to drive growth. We all know how expensive it is to acquire new customers, and it's best to protect and keep the ones that you've got and maintain that revenue for growth. So great to see more companies focused on this as a top priority for the year. We've also been fielding a survey over the last few weeks to get some results from the broader community. And what we're seeing is that sales and CS leaders agree improving retention rates is the number one most important business outcome that they can focus on for their organization. So it's a really interesting shift that we've seen over the last couple of quarters from that focus on acquisition and growth through new business, but now there's an intense focus on retention rates and making sure that we're providing recurring value to our customers and helping them achieve their goals. We also saw that a majority of sales and CS leaders believe their business lacks a transparent and coordinated pre- and post-sale strategy. So that is a top challenge. I'm curious if any of you are also feeling that strain within your organization. So if you need some advice from our panelists today, again, please use your Q&A feature, and we'd love to try and get to some of those questions at the end. But really what we're talking about today is the new growth equation. So acquisition is always going to be vital, but how can we focus on retention, expansion and upsell, and drive greater collaboration and connection across the sales and CS team? So with that, I'm excited to introduce you to some of our in-house experts. So first up, we have Katie Yagodnik, our Director of Customer Success Operations at Totango. She spearheads success operations for our very own Totango instance. We like to drink our own champagne, and she leverages her background in both sales and CS leadership roles. Fun fact, Katie is a past enterprise customer of Totango who deployed us at a large sales and CS team, and they were able to demonstrate results on increasing GRR and driving over $4 million in incremental revenue. So that's a great result. Thanks for joining us, Katie. On the ops topic, I also am joined by Mia Lopez, our Director of Revenue Operations, and she's been handling all things go-to-market operations at Totango for a little over a year, focusing on improving our lead to cash process and facilitating communication between all revenue generating teams. Thank you, one revenue team. That's what we're here to talk about today. Welcome, Mia. Next up, I'm joined by Charlie Sonnenberg, Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Totango. He came up through the ranks at Salesforce, where he worked closely with their CSG team and advised customers on best practices for sales and CS partnership. So great background coming into this conversation. Also led teams at MasterCard, where he drove transformation of the CS team across the data org. Welcome, Charlie. And then last but not least, we are joined by Kristen Hallis, Director of Customer Success at Totango, who uses her extensive 15+ years of customer success leadership experience to guide our teams and empower our own Totango team of success experts. And a fun fact about Kristen, Kristen has successfully used and administered Totango as a customer for 2 organizations prior to joining us on the Totango team. So Kristen, love that background. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's jump right in. So I gave some context from some data we're seeing about the relationship between sales and CS. It's a sticky one. It's certainly a hot topic in the industry right now. And so let's just tackle this head on. I know you all, our sales and CS teams met last month. We were talking about how to improve our working relationship for 2024. So spill the beans. How did it go? What were the highs and lows of that discussion? And what can our attendees learn from that?
Yeah, well, so it wasn't a 30-minute conversation. It was a number of workshops over the last couple of weeks. Because last year, I think across tech was a really tough year. So we had to make some changes to our go-to-market strategy coming into this year. But I think the important thing for us was sitting down and just calling out what worked well and what didn't work well on both sides. And everybody came in, put their ego to the side, had a really growth mindset about the entire endeavor. And we started to think through how do we map back through what the company goals are from a overall revenue standpoint, of which we have a specific expansion number, which my team owns, and our churn, GRR, NRR numbers, which Kristen's team owns. So once we kind of diverted from the goals into who's going to own those specific business processes, like Kristen's team owns renewal, my team owns expansion, we then started to think through how do we segment out our customer base and how do we map the right people on each side to each size of customer. And we did try and line them up, as close to one-to-one as we can get, so they can develop a bit of a working relationship together. Then the last piece was once we had that customer segmentation strategy done, we started to look at how do we tier customers even within those segments. So on the sales side, we think of tier one, tier two, tier three accounts where there is the most expansion potential. And then we share that information with Kristen's team. And we put a plan together to think about who does what within the account and how do we map what we're doing today with our customers and what we could be doing in the future back to what that business is trying to accomplish. Kristen, I don't know if I missed anything there.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it great. I would say, first of all, just echoing Charlie's sentiment that this is not a 30-minute quick fix. It really does begin with building a strong partnership between both sales and CS. And having really good collaboration amongst all of the team members and the leaders. I think it's really crucial, just to what Charlie mentioned, that we can establish clear alignment and KPIs from the start. This really ensures that each individual's objectives are understood and contribute to the partnership, and have the greatest impact on the customer. Equally important is just sharing all of the customer information between sales and CS, just presenting a more united front for the customer. Customers don't want to repeat themselves while speaking to different team members. They want to see a cohesive team working together towards those desired outcomes. And I think that that's really important. Katie, I don't know if you have anything else from an operations standpoint that you would add there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that in listening to what both Kristen and Charlie had to say, that's where they have to really lean into the operations so that we can streamline and ensure that how we are talking from the pre to the post sale aligns all the way through. So just teeing up a little bit more of the conversation later, but we'll talk a little bit about a business outcome identification exercise that we went through this past year. That's really helped streamline and ensure a strong customer experience from the get-go.
Well, I think that's a great reminder for folks that this takes time. It takes practice to build those relationships. So make sure you book more than 30 minutes on your calendars. But thanks for getting it all out on the table. I think that's a great place for us to start. Obviously, if it were easily solved, we wouldn't be here today. So let's get in a little bit more deeper into some of the strategies that we think could make a big difference for some of the folks that are dialed in today. What are some tips and tricks for breaking down those barriers between the CS and sales org? And what are some of the best practices that have worked within our team or that you've seen happen within some of our customers?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Karen. So, I had the pleasure of hosting with Update AI, a masterclass that was on this very specific topic about how CS and sales can get together for better collaboration. And I would say what we were talking about last October still holds true in just the overall barriers to the success of both having a good partnership and working together. One of them being really taking a look at ownership ambiguity, excuse me. I know there's a saying that if everybody owns it, then nobody does. So you really have to hone in on who's responsible for what. I know what has worked for us at Totango is outlining a RACI so we can make sure we're all aligned on who's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And that can be overarching RACI. We've even had RACIs for renewal negotiations that we've baked out again, so everybody knows what role they have to play. That goes into ensuring that there's not communication gaps and silos between teams. You absolutely don't want to have missteps. I would say when it comes to communication gaps and trying to tackle that, we have bi-weekly top account calls, bi-weekly risk meetings with leaderships owned and assigned to ensuring we have a plan in place to moving a customer forward. We've also moved to having an entire go-to-market motion when it comes to training and our level up trainings to ensure the entire go-to-market team is aligned on messaging. I've also seen some of the barriers are over-promising and or under promising to customers and setting unrealistic expectations. So if your team hasn't championed ensuring that the post-sales team is a part of the ICP discussion, do it now, because the pre-sale is so unbelievably crucial to setting the tone for the overall customer experience. I think the other two that have stood out to me is just trust in general. Nobody wants to undermine collaboration and long-term strategy. And with that, that's what happens when trust isn't there. So I implore everyone to stop hiding behind texts and emails and just pick up the phone, have a collaborative conversation. It all starts with creating that trust between the two teams. And then last but not least, when it comes to really focusing in on how we can help from an operational perspective, trying to remove as much red tape and process rigidity as we can. If you look inside your organizations today, and if there's places where you're making things too hard, have those workshops to see where you can reduce the friction for both the pre and the post sales to get from point A to point B faster. So those are just a couple of the top things that come to mind, Karen, and I'll ping it back to you.
That's great. Anyone else have anything to add, Charlie, maybe from the sales side?
Yeah, Katie, I think you and Mia have done a really nice job setting up our systems to document what we said we were going to accomplish with the customer in the sales cycle. Like, what was the goal of the project? What's the business problem that we're solving? What's the timeline that we need to solve it within? And pass that from Salesforce, which is our upfront system of record, to our own instance of we call it 880 Totango, to operationalize the onboarding and make sure there's a really clean handoff between sales, onboarding, implementation teams, and CS. So I think, big kudos to you guys for putting that in place. It's been really successful for us.
Awesome. So let's transition and look ahead, right? There's a lot of momentum, a lot of change on the horizon for the customer success landscape, especially when we talk about accountability and driving revenue, which teams have commercial responsibility for what part of the customer life cycle. And as frontline leaders, want to just dig in a little bit. What are your predictions for the future of CS and sales, both individually and how those two orgs work together? What shifts do you see each of these functions making, or maybe even share like some of the shifts that we've made over our time working together? So Mia, I'm going to throw it over to you to kick us off.
Yeah, Karen, I think you touched on this a little bit at the beginning because other folks are also starting to see this trend. But I think what we're seeing is a big shift to sustainable growth throughout the SaaS industry, right? So where a few years ago, there's a lot of funding going towards companies that had potential for a lot of growth. Right now, I think that funding is going towards companies that have more potential for profitability. So instead of like growth at all costs, that's really not cutting it anymore. No one is looking for growth at all costs, right? We need sustainable growth. So if we take that and look inward, right, how are all of these companies going to start improving profitability, right? I think the easy answer and the why we're all here, it's your customer base, right? And when it comes to your customer base, what's important? Renewing, retaining, obviously, and expanding. And we know that sales and CS are both sharing responsibility for those things. So what can we do and what shifts do we see companies taking in order to make sure that that is happening? Because if they're not paying attention to that, then you're going to lose out on funding and you're going to have a hard time sustaining your budget. So I think on our end, there's been a lot of things that we've done operationally to make sure that those teams are working together, whether it's just making sure that there's information flowing from one system to the other, right? So we said, we use Salesforce and then of course our own platform Totango, making sure that we are bringing data to one place. Everything that comes from Salesforce goes into Totango, and things that start in Totango come into Salesforce. If there's a bidirectional sync there, and more we are pulling information in from one to the other. processes, just in general, making sure that we have a playbook anytime these things happen, whether it's renewals, whether it's expansion, making sure that it's repeatable, and that we can, we're facilitating this for our team so that these two teams can work together, because, we said it, it's hard, there's tension, it's sometimes these things happen. So the more we can put processes in place to make sure everyone knows what their roles and responsibilities are, the better off we'll be. I think pass it to Kristen.
Yeah, thanks, Mia. I would agree. I think, as Mia pointed out, the ongoing trend is towards sustainable growth. And that really demands that the CS team or function takes on more responsibility when it impacts revenue. I think all of the things that you just stated around, ensuring that we have a good process in place and are really key. But I also think it requires, clarification and really clear goals and outcomes for the ownership of renewals, expansion, and new business, which ultimately affects, the customer experience. So it's really important for teams to be in sync, with the customer at the forefront of what that alignment looks like, and always putting the customer first. So today, just as Mia, you stated, we achieve this alignment not only through the solid partnership that we all have, but also by better aligning our systems, which you referenced, primarily through the use of Totango and Salesforce, and joining those forces together to make it smoother on those, integrations and the transitions between team to team.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that something that came to mind just as you two were talking, and really when you're taking a look at the customer success space and the commercial conversations that we're potentially going to be expected to have, I really started to think about, sales and marketing has had the operational rigor around attribution in line for a really long time. We're still learning so much about the post journey and digging into what are the things that are driving the successful business outcomes of our customers. But it's so important in that post-sales journey that as a customer success team, we align on how we are driving revenue for the business. So for example, for us last year, I recognized that we were sharing all types of expansion opportunities with our sales team. I know you're all out there nodding when I say they were coming through Slack, they were coming through email, they were coming through one-off conversations, but there was no way in that fashion that we could quantify the amount of opportunity that we were sharing with our sales team and that we were really contributing to bottom line revenue. So we put a process in place. We identified the different types of opportunities that we were sending over. And by the end of the year, and I think we started this in September, I was able to recognize that we had sent 78 opportunities over to the sales team, almost $1 million in pipeline. And by the way, our expansion opportunities close over 50% of the time. I think right now it's 22% on a new business sale. So that's why it's so imperative to try and get some type of operational rigor around what we're contributing post-sales, just similar to what we've been able to work on for years, an attribution around the pre-sale. So that was just something else I just thought I would add.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to underscore for folks dialing in. You kind of mentioned how it started organically, and there was a lot of the individual outreach over Slack or email or, ad hoc in the hallway conversations, if you will, whether that's in life or hybrid. But I think what's important that you pointed out, which is getting together and identifying the process and then looking at how your systems can help you execute upon that. So in this case, we're talking about that bidirectional sync between our CRM Salesforce and Totango. And that's a really great way, as you pointed out, to have data, because this is all about how we can demonstrate the value and the impact of customer success and that post-sale alignment across the team. So also thank you for the shout out to marketing. One revenue team, one dream. We're talking about sales today, but we can't forget our friends in marketing. We're often partnering with you all to run expansion campaigns and provide that ongoing exposure to the value of our product. So all right, I digress. I see we've got some questions coming in. So just a reminder for folks dialing in, if you have a question for our panelists, please drop it in the Q&A panel within Zoom. So I'm going to get to one right now because I think it's a good segue for the next section where I want to turn up the heat a little bit. So this question is, well, I think it would be great to have someone from the sales and CS team respond. But the question is, if sales is closing a customer, but the CS team finds out that the customer might not have value or be able to get the value out of the product, how would you handle that process?
You want me to start? Or you want Kristen to start?
You came off the mic first, Charlie, so I'm going to hand it.
Okay, sure. Okay. I think, yeah, it's a really good question. I think then it becomes a bigger conversation around like where is the business headed, and how do we find areas that are going to contribute for whatever function you're selling into to map what they do into the business strategy, and then start to think about how do we shift this piece of technology or services, whatever the product or service offering is, to best support that, to try and deliver the value throughout the course of the contract. It's a really unique question. I think that's kind of on sales in the upfront to define that value statement and make sure that value statement is really strong, and we document it and we hand it to CS. But I think it's a really good opportunity to just kind of take a step back and be like, all right, what's going on within the business that makes whatever we sold not of value anymore? And are there other areas that you guys are focused on from an overall like process function, whatever standpoint, where we can kind of reshift this offering?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, I think that was a really great call out. I would say for us, the most important thing is what Charlie started with, is just identifying what are those outcomes that are going to make the customer successful and finding the most value. And if we identify that and capture that early on, not only the outcome, but how are they going to measure the success of that, then we're able together to be able to track to the measurement of that. And that gets us a good benchmark from the start. So hopefully that leaves us less in the dark when things come up that there is a potential churn. However, if that situation does arise, we also ourselves have a pretty rigor risk program and process that we have in place. And it is, through the use of Totango to be able to help us identify those customers that are at risk. But outside of just that, being able to have a joint conversation and a program where it does involve both of the AE and the CSM, so that everybody is all hands on deck to make sure that we're able to, take that potential churn away, and that together we are truly tackling, what are those issues or the concerns, and how do we get them back on track with, realizing the value.
Yeah, and I guess we can even give almost like a real life example of this too. And Karen, tell me if I'm going too far off track. Like we sell to customer success teams, and sometimes the business strategy shifts, and that customer success team can be impacted like any other team. So it's a good opportunity for us in both sales and CS to say, okay, well, who's going to own the revenue motion post sale? Who's going to own your current customer motion post sale? What are they doing today? Like, what's their process look like today? Is it working well? Is it not? And then we try and kind of map back to some of those gaps that we identify.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point to emphasize that there's a lot of different models for commercial responsibility out there. I know from speaking with our own customers, sometimes the CS organization owns the renewal motion. Sometimes that sits within the sales org. Similarly, from an expansion perspective, there might be an org where an AE or an account manager in the sales org is owning that responsibility. I've also talked to customers who have built out fully commercially responsible post-sales organizations where the customer success org is responsible for expansion, not only opportunity identification, but closing that. So I think that's that really just highlights and underscores what we talked about, which is this shift happening in customer success overall. So would love to hear from more folks in the chat and the Q&A, but let's turn up the heat because we love some spicy questions and hot takes. So, no filter here, or like filter a little bit maybe, because, we want to walk away from this still a strong team. But Kristen, I'm going to go to you first. So if you could have Charlie coach his sellers to do just one thing that would make an exponential impact on your team's success, what would that be?
Yeah, great question. And I do see another similar question asking about the handover process that came in through the Q&A. So I think those kind of go hand in hand in what I stated before. I think from the very start, identifying and capturing those outcomes is extremely important. I also think that being able to have one place or one source of truth where we have all of the information, the notes, the conversations, where the CSM can get fully up to speed on all the things that Charlie just mentioned, you know, that happen in the sales process. We're not always in those conversations. So what is their goal? Why are they trying to, you know, implement our product? What are they trying to get as the value? Not every person within the organization has the same goal. So what were those initial things that brought them to the table? Just being able to really identify that, and then just as equally important, again, that handover, having what that measurement of success is extremely crucial for us to make sure that we can start the conversation with that benchmark from day one. And that we're able to, you know, make sure that together we're moving in the right direction and we're adding the right value from the start.
Great, thank you. All right, this next hot question is for you, Katie. So if you had 8 hours in a room with Mia, CS and revenue operations together to tackle a problem that would make a big impact on the business, what would you work on?
Well, there are so many things as I think about the list that Mia and I talk about on a daily basis of things that we would like to accomplish, but I think I would really hone in on anything that was going to create streamline and efficiencies that our team can use both internally and externally. So something that we worked on last year that I thought that I could highlight, and we've talked about it a lot in the conversation so far, is just really making sure that we were aligned from a pre and post sales perspective when it comes to driving our customer outcomes, because we're in the outcomes business and we have to make sure that we identify and are all speaking a common language. And our customers say many different things, but we needed to make sure that we aligned on what those things meant. And so back at last July, we did an exercise of these are all the different things that we're hearing from our customers. How can we distill those down into 6 different buckets? Those 6 different buckets being enhanced data visibility, boost team efficiency, improve customer health, prevent churn, the list goes on. But we needed to make sure that we had identified, and we wanted to see, well, what are the outcomes, the top ones that our customers are trying to achieve? That being, if you will, enhancing data visibility, which we've talked about, making sure we have clear, confident data between 2 different systems. And in addition to that, boosting team efficiency, which is why I'm leaning into, I would work on anything that would create efficiency with Mia. But what I really wanted to highlight about this is while we were doing this exercise in customer success, the entire organization was having similar conversations, which allowed for us to have one big conversation on what we were going to align the outcomes were on, how we were going to be able to map for our sales team. If you hear any of these things, this means they're trying to boost team efficiency so that from the beginning, when they're ready to say, hey, we've brought on this wonderful customer, this is what they're wanting to do, we're able to have that in our system for them to easily identify that, get that to our implementation team, and that flows all the way down throughout the entire customer journey. And so again, I think anything you can do to make that easier for your team, you can streamline it, you can put definitions, and everyone understands are the things that I want to spend the most time with me on.
I just wanted to chime in with a quick point on that, Katie, because you said something that I think like people should just take a step back and consider when you say speak the same language. It was fascinating to see how everyone on the team read into the different business outcomes that were listed. I mean, very similar words, but one person said, well, I think this means that. And someone else said, I kind of read it like this. And this is just internally. So then imagine how like it's like a game of telephone, right? Like, what does that mean to each one of our customers? So it was really, really interesting to see that. And it just like taking a step back to make sure that you are internally speaking the same language, so that when you communicate that to your customers, they are also speaking that language, and making sure you understand what it is that they need is super, super important. It feels simple, but it wasn't until we drilled into that when we realized, oh, wow, we actually, we have a little bit of a problem here. Let's make sure that we are all on the same page in terms of what these things actually mean, what these words mean.
And
That is,
oh, sorry.
I was just going to chime in because that's an excellent point, and it's home for me too, even from a marketing or one revenue team perspective, whether we're talking about marketing, sales, or CS, even just something as simple as what is a lead? What is an opportunity? It really is important to make sure that everyone on every team has the same understanding and definition, and that varies, across companies. So if you move from one role to another, it's a great place to start, and just making sure you have that shared understanding and common language. So great point. Katie, were you going to add one more thing?
I was just going to add, for everyone out there, it doesn't have to be fancy. Well, yes, we're wanting to get this into Salesforce and get this into Totango and have automation and whatnot. It can be just a start of aligning on those outcomes, and it can be an email to your implementation team or whoever is starting that process after you sell it. It again doesn't have to be fancy. So I don't want everyone out there to think, oh, you have to have this all together. No, just align on what you're trying to accomplish, what your ICP, your customers are trying to do, and get a process and build upon that over time in terms of the intricacies of being able to do so with tech.
Yes. Crawl, walk, run. So
yes.
Don't worry wherever you're at on your journey. For folks listening in, you can start simple and then add that automation as you get that process underway. So, all right, let's turn the next question over to Charlie. So Charlie, if you could have critical insights delivered to your email inbox every morning, what would you ask Katie, our director of CS operations, to include?
Well, I am incredibly lucky because I get a lot of this today, and the stuff that I'm going to talk about that I don't have, we're actively working on. I think about it in a couple different categories. So there's like the overall health of the business, like kind of the snapshot of that point in time. Then you break that down into the different components of the customer journey, and then it's kind of the trends, like trend analysis within that. So it's like, what's the health of the overall business? What's the health of one segment versus another segment, or one product versus another product? And then for the customers that are in onboarding, which ones are on track, which ones are off track? The customers that are coming up for renewal, which ones are at risk, which ones are planning to cancel, which ones are planning to downgrade, and then which ones are healthy and we can actually go in and get an upsell, and which ones are kind of on track, like what's the progress there. And then the trends is kind of the same thing. I want to see the big customers that have gone from green to red or red to green.
All right. So on that note, red, hot question, last one. This one's over to you, Mia. And then we've got some fantastic questions that have come in from the audience. So Mia, what's been the most impactful project in which you've collaborated with the CS team, and what made it work specifically?
Yeah, I would say it was tracking subscriptions and provisioning across our different systems. So when I started at Totango, it was a bit of a pain point. Things were a bit scattered, and it was just taking a lot of time in terms of like internal communications once a customer did sign on, or a customer wanted to add a license. And so we did a lot of work across a lot of different systems. So our CPQ, Salesforce, Totango, to make sure that that information was flowing and that there was a lot of automation involved, so that we didn't have to sit and have days worth of internal communications and get something done for our customers. I think what really made that work, because it was quite a big project and it took some time, but I think the reason we were successful is because we had a shared goal. So Katie and I worked really, really closely on this, and the shared goal at the end of the day was, how do we make this easy for our customers? How do we make this a good experience for them, right? And so obviously, like a big, I think for us, like something that we are really focusing on is this time to value. And so we wanted to make sure that everything that we did was in service to our customers. And so anytime there was a decision that we had to make, or it was like, should we do it this way or that way, we went back to that same point. what is going to be best for our customers, and we stuck with that. And I think that's really what made us successful. It wasn't about, sales is going to do this and CS is going to do that. We're going to try to automate as much as possible, and we're just going to make this really, really a good experience for our customers, so they're not waiting around for this.
Great. Thank you so much for all answering unfiltered in our hot takes segment of this discussion. We've had some really, really great questions come in from the audience, including a request for us to share the RACI model that we've built between our two teams. So note to self, that sounds like a great follow-up blog post. So we'll work on that. And there's certainly many options, again, depending on the roles and responsibilities for each team, but always helpful to have some inspiration. I want to make sure we get to someone's question. This was shared in advance of the webinar, so thanks for taking that step. The question is, how can you drive or get buy-in from sales on the importance of collecting good and measurable desired outcomes from the client or the prospect during that sales engagement process? Charlie, I think this is a good one for you to chime in on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think it's become really, really important in the last year as we've moved towards more sustainable growth and a path to profitability. Fundamentally, these projects are just not getting approved anymore. The old days used to be if you had a little bit of a problem, a little bit of an inefficiency, you could, hey, I went and evaluated some tools. It's going to cost X amount of money. Like, we'll buy the tool. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll just cancel. It's kind of no big deal. Now, you're spending the company's money, and all of these projects are going up to the CFO for approval. Like, even bigger companies and smaller spend projects, we've got a customer right now that's billions of dollars in revenue, and they're planning to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get started in digital CS. And that is a CCO to CEO conversation around the business case. So not only is it going to help in the post-sale and help mapping to like what's the actual business impact we're driving, it's going to help you get your deal done to begin with.
All right. So I'm gonna combine a couple of questions, and Kristen, just a heads up, I'm gonna throw this one over to you. So there's a couple folks that want to know if we can share some more detail on how we tackled the opportunities that are shared by customer success with sales. And another question came in, if we can shed any light on how we score our opportunities or give insights into the relationships, that would also be helpful to share with the audience.
Sure. Well, I can kick this off on, how do we work our process, and maybe Katie, I will lean on you a little bit more for the second half of that question. So we use Totango in order to identify the opportunities. So from a CS perspective, if the CSM hears during a conversation a customer is wanting to bring an additional team onto the platform, and that's going to require, let's just say, some additional licenses, then the CSM will they will fire off a play that allows us to first track that was a CS-led opportunity, so that we're able to give all those great statistics that Katie gave earlier and identifying that those opportunities came in. And then the next piece is that they will put together a touch point that goes directly over to the account executive, as well as Charlie and myself, so that we're all in the loop on this opportunity and the specifics around it. So it will ask them to say what, product, so how many licenses do they want to purchase, what is the reason for this purchase, which then allows us to get deeper into all the things that we've talked about here today. What are those greater opportunities, maybe more than just the 1 or 2 licenses that are in there, so that we can find those greater expansion opportunities. Katie, I don't know if you have anything else to add as far as the tracking of it.
Well, I was going to say we also have the who, so that it's really easy and streamlined for who the AE needs to speak with. And then I know recently we were just speaking with Charlie about adding some additional things to help bake that out. Remind me, Karen, what the second half of that question was.
Just how you align on scoring the opportunities. So
Gotcha.
Yeah, you could interpret that however you'd like.
Yeah, so I I think when we take a look at opportunities and we had first rolled this out, we wanted to look at what the definition of as an opportunity rather than a lead. A lead being like, hey, maybe they'd want to purchase, an opportunity being, no, they're ready for a contract. It's negotiated. Like, we just need you to get the contract out. So that's kind of where we draw the line in terms of scoring goes. Nothing as sophisticated as I know you, Karen, and team have been working on in terms of new business lead scoring. But that's really how we look at it today, with many, and making sure that if it's a CSQO, customer success qualified opportunity, to the sales rep or account executive, like, hey, this has a P1 need, the customer needs to be spoken with today because this is money that we don't want to leave on the table. So that's kind of the difference that we have between leads and opportunities and how we score it.
Okay.
I think one more important point on that too is there's a kind of a soft goal for Kristen's team in opportunity identification, and then they're comped on that as well. So that's part of their actual comp plan, that we share that metric across sales and CS, and they're comped on finding it, and we're comped on closing it. Like, from our perspective in sales, we got to track the pipeline appropriately and figure out, is it all coming from marketing? Is it all coming from CS? Is it coming from outbounding? I'm a bit of a believer in, like, I kind of don't care where the pipeline is coming from as long as it's coming. So if we're doing a really, really good job on the CS side, let's figure out what's working there, and let's use that as an opportunity to standardize and roll it out across the rest of the team.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one point there in terms of the tracking, sorry, Karen, I was just going to say, so we do have a source in Salesforce. So when you look at lead source on our opportunities, there is one that is customer success, right? And so we're able to track that. And then when it comes time for our weekly readouts to execs and the board, we're able to break it up, like Charlie said. And we see, in terms of pipeline generation, we can say what came from the marketing team, what came from sales, outbound sales, and then what came from CS, because we do track it that way and have a specific value for CS.
That's a great add. Yeah, it's important to be able to share this information and track those KPIs within the team. But at the end of the day, we're all asked to report up to the C-suite or the board. So definitely excellent to have that alignment and clarity on how we're measuring the business impact there. So I think that was the way that you all answered that. Clearly we're collaborating. Everyone had a point of view. So this next question from Ashley also gets at the notion of collaboration and teamwork. And the question is, if there are multiple CSMs involved in an account, servicing different products or service agreements, what are tips to keep that full account team aligned and aware of what's going on with the account? And I can think of some product features that we have available, but any other process or team tips that you have to share? Kristen, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, I would say a couple of just very simple things with the use of Totango. It's really to make sure, one, that all of the communication, and I think I've said this throughout the last 45 minutes, is in that one place. So one of the additional things that we have set up, we do utilize Chorus and have all of the Chorus conversations going into Totango, and that allows everyone to stay aligned. So whereas you might have multiple CSMs, you may have AEs or additional folks working within that customer, everyone gets the exposure to everything that's happening and the summaries of what's happening on every call. Not everybody can be on every call, so it allows everyone to stay aligned. I would say the other important thing is to identify, is there someone that is owning that overall relationship, and then a different, person into those different products. And how you set that up within the Totango hierarchy structure can also help those folks get aligned into who owns what piece of the process, so that you can better, understand that this is the thing that I need to know or I need to take ownership on versus someone else.
Yeah, Kristen, I think that's a really good point. I think there's kind of two sides of this. There's the account plan. So what's going on within the account and who's going to do what? And it's like, how do we map to different people within the org? And then there's tracking the health at different layers of tracking it by product. So if you have bigger teams that are focused on specific products, like understanding where their product health gaps are, and then making sure they're part of that account plan to actually go and execute on, saving that product or getting that product back in the green.
And we're almost at time, so I'm just going to chime in on this one because, you know, I'm an exec sponsor aligned to some of our accounts, and as a CMO, I may not be involved in the day-to-day of some of that account planning with our CSM and sales team, but I am able to use our AI capabilities and quickly pull up an account summary. So that has been something that's helpful, and we've been offering that in a closed beta, but more to come soon on that one. And it's been a real help for me to get an overview of what's happening in that customer account. So glad to see some folks in the chat are also loving that AI account summary. More to come. But I cannot thank everyone enough from dialing in all over the globe. This was an excellent conversation. Kristen, Katie, Mia, Charlie, thanks for taking the filters off, being open and honest with the hot takes. I'll end on that note because open and transparent communication and collaboration is what really helps that sales and CS partnership work well, and having that alignment towards driving business impact, driving customer outcomes for the customers, in turn drives that business impact for you and your team. So thanks so much.